The Arizona sun baked the airfield until even the asphalt seemed to shimmer. Waves of heat danced above the parked helicopters lined up on the tarmac, dark green beasts of metal and firepower. The rhythmic clank of tools, the scent of jet fuel, and the hum of machinery filled the U.S. Army Aviation Base that afternoon. It was just another scorching day in the desert, another round of maintenance, and another layer of sweat on the backs of the soldiers who worked there. In Hangar 3, a small crowd had gathered around an Apache, H-64, the Army's most formidable attack helicopter. The crew had been having a long morning trying to solve a minor systems glitch. General Robert Ann, tall, broad, and graying at the temples, strode in, impatient as ever. He wasn't the kind of man to enjoy waiting, especially not under the desert sun. His uniform was crisp, but his tone was sharp enough to cut steel. "What's the holdup, people?" he barked, scanning the hangar with that old-school glare that made most soldiers straighten instantly. One of the younger technicians stammered, "Sir, it's the flight control interface. We're recalibrating the sensors." "Been recalibrating for hours," Anne said dryly. "I could have flown one of these things to Mexico and back by now." The soldiers chuckled nervously. No one dared answer. The general's eyes landed on Captain Emily Carter, standing a few feet away, small-framed but composed, her brown hair tied neatly beneath her cap. Her uniform bore oil stains, and her gloves were blackened from work. She wasn't just any technician. She was the lead maintenance officer for this Apache unit, and one of the few women in her division. The general's gaze lingered, and with a smirk, he said the words that started everything. "Maybe we should let her fly the Apache next," he said loudly, his tone dripping with mock amusement. "Might get it off the ground faster than you boys." The room erupted in laughter. Even some of Emily's closest colleagues grinned awkwardly. The joke wasn't meant to be cruel, just the usual teasing that floated around bases like this. But the laughter hit differently that day. It carried years of condescension, years of being underestimated. Emily looked up from the open panel of the helicopter. Her eyes met the general's, calm and unflinching. For a brief second, no one spoke. Then she said it, clear, even, and without a hint of a smile. "Permission to try, sir?" The laughter stopped like someone had flipped a switch. The hangar went silent, except for the faint hum of cooling fans. The soldiers exchanged glances. The general raised an eyebrow, surprised but intrigued. He'd expected embarrassment, maybe a nervous chuckle, not a challenge. "You're serious?" he asked, folding his arms. "Yes, sir," Emily said. "If the system's running clean, I'd like to test the calibration in the cockpit myself." He studied her for a moment. There was no arrogance in her voice, no defiance, just steady conviction. Finally, a faint grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well," he said slowly, "I did say you should fly it. Let's see what happens when someone takes me literally." The soldiers murmured in disbelief. No one could tell if the general was joking again, but Emily was already moving. She wiped her gloves, climbed onto the side platform, and stepped into the pilot's seat, the seat most mechanics never touched. From where she sat, the cockpit looked like a different universe. Switches, displays, levers, and blinking indicators surrounded her like a constellation of tiny stars. But she didn't look intimidated. She'd spent years inside this machine, not flying it, but understanding it. She knew every fuse, every connection, every whisper of the rotor system. "Captain Carter," the general said from below, "I hope you at least know which button makes it go up." A few soldiers laughed, but it was quieter now, uneasy. Emily didn't answer. She simply reached for the controls, her hands steady. Inside her, her heartbeat drummed with a strange rhythm, excitement, fear, and something else. Pride. She could almost hear her father's voice from her childhood. "Engines have language." They talk if you listen close enough. She'd listened her whole life. She ran through the pre-flight checklist from memory. Fuel pressure, hydraulics, engine temperature. She'd done these checks hundreds of times, only never from this seat. Her fingers moved confidently over the switches. Every sound, every vibration told her what was working and what wasn't. The general stood back, arms crossed, half expecting the helicopter to sputter or alarm. Instead, the rotors began to turn. Slowly, power built, the massive blades cutting the hot air. The hangar filled with a growing thunder. A few soldiers took cautious steps back. Someone muttered, "She's actually doing it." Emily's eyes stayed fixed on the readouts. Everything was clean. The engine sang perfectly in tune. With her left hand, she eased the collective lever just a fraction. The Apache's nose tilted slightly, wheels lightening. Her heart jumped. Then, without hesitation, she lifted. The helicopter rose 2 feet off the ground, smooth, balanced, and steady. Gasps broke out across the hangar. The general's grin disappeared. The Apache hovered in place like it was made for her hands. No wild tilt, no overcorrection, just a perfect float of precision. Her eyes darted to the control screen, adjusting the yaw slightly. The machine obeyed like it trusted her completely. It lasted less than a minute, but for everyone watching, it felt like forever. The thunder of the rotors echoed like a pulse in the chest of every soldier standing there. Then, calm as ever, Emily lowered the craft. The landing was soft, elegant, a pilot's landing. The rotors slowed, dust settling gently around her. When the silence returned, all that could be heard was the ticking of cooling metal. The general stood there, his jaw slightly slack. He blinked, as if trying to make sense of what he'd just witnessed. A few soldiers exchanged stunned looks. One whispered, "Sir, she just flew it." An didn't respond immediately. His cigar, half lit, had fallen from his fingers unnoticed. Finally, he said quietly, "That wasn't luck." Emily climbed down from the cockpit, her boots hitting the floor with a soft thud. She removed her gloves, handed them to the mechanic beside her, and said simply, "Calibration complete, sir." There was no arrogance in her tone. No need for it. The proof had already filled the hangar with a roar of blades and disbelief. The general looked at her for a long moment. Then, just as quickly as the shock appeared, his commanding mask returned. He straightened, nodded once, and said, "Noted, Captain." Dismissed. But as she walked away, he found himself glancing back at the Apache. He'd seen hundreds of pilots fly that beast, trained, certified, combat-tested men. But none had made it look like that, effortless, like she and the machine shared a single mind. The soldiers slowly returned to their duties, but the energy in the hangar had shifted. The laughter that had once followed Emily Carter turned into quiet whispers, half disbelief, half respect. And though no one dared say it aloud, one thought burned in every mind. If that was her first time, what would happen if she truly learned to fly? The hangar lights flickered overhead as Emily Carter walked away from the Apache, her boots leaving soft echoes on the polished concrete floor. The admiration in her colleagues' eyes barely registered. Her mind was elsewhere. She often retreated into thought after moments like this, when achievement and expectation collided, leaving a strange quiet behind. For Emily, flying the Apache wasn't just a thrill. It was a lifetime of preparation, of battles fought silently, far from any medals or headlines. Born in a small Texas town, Emily had grown up surrounded by dusty roads, open skies, and the scent of motor oil. Her father, a retired Air Force mechanic, was a man of few words but abundant lessons. By the age of 7, Emily could identify every tool in his workshop, and by 10, she could rebuild a small engine entirely by herself. Most girls her age were learning to ride bicycles or play with dolls. Emily was learning the language of machines. To her, every gear, every valve, every wire carried a story, a rhythm that, if understood, could transform chaos into control. Her obsession with flight began almost as soon as she could see the horizon. She would climb onto the roof of their barn at sunset, staring at the contrails of jets slicing the sky. "One day, I'll be up there," she'd whisper to herself. But dreams, she quickly learned, were never simple. Her small-town reality offered encouragement in theory, but opportunity in practice was scarce. Even when she entered high school, she faced skepticism. Girls, they said, weren't made for machines as large and temperamental as airplanes. She shrugged off their doubts, but each dismissal fueled her determination. Emily applied to flight school after high school, her heart full of hope. But the military world was harsher than she'd imagined. Instructors would question her every move, sometimes openly mocking her. "You're too careful," one pilot had told her after a navigation exercise. Flight isn't about safety, it's about instinct. Emily had tried to prove herself. She'd stayed late in simulators, memorized manuals, dissected every system she could touch. Yet, despite her skill, the instructors shook their heads. Her careful precision was mistaken for hesitancy. She wasn't reckless enough to be considered a natural pilot. It was a bitter lesson. Technical mastery alone was not enough. But Emily refused to surrender her dream. Instead, she pivoted, joining the Army's aviation maintenance program. It wasn't what she'd imagined as a young girl staring at the sky, but it gave her access, direct, intimate access, to the helicopters she adored. Over the next 5 years, Emily immersed herself in the Apache H-64, learning its hydraulics, avionics, weapon systems, and even quirks that manuals never mentioned. Pilots came and went, but Emily remained, quietly building knowledge that no textbook could offer. Her reputation among the technical crew was impeccable. She could diagnose a fault in minutes, often before a pilot realized a problem existed. Engines responded differently to her touch. Sensors seemed to align more smoothly, and the Apache itself seemed calmer when she was near. Rumors began to circulate. Some said she was a prodigy. Others whispered that she had a near supernatural understanding of machines. Emily ignored the gossip. She was too busy learning, too busy preparing for a day she barely allowed herself to imagine, one where she might actually fly. That day came unexpectedly. When the general had joked about letting her fly the Apache, it ignited more than the curiosity of the soldiers. It unleashed decades of preparation condensed into a single decision. For Emily, it wasn't about proving the general wrong. It was about demonstrating that years of silent dedication could manifest in a moment of truth. She knew the Apache's systems intimately, from rotor pitch to the hydraulic feedback loops. She could anticipate the machine's responses to changes in weight, wind, and throttle with near-perfect accuracy. What she had lacked in flight certification, she had compensated for in understanding, and instinct forged in thousands of hours of technical work. Her childhood memories provided a steady anchor. She remembered the first time her father let her handle a turbine engine part. Warning, respect the machine, Emily. It will do what you ask, but it will never forgive what you don't understand. That philosophy had guided her ever since. The Apache wasn't just a helicopter. It was a living puzzle, a symphony of mechanical harmony that responded to those who treated it with care and precision. Emily's mastery wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, relentless, and exacting qualities that often went unnoticed until moments like the one in Hangar 3. Despite her calm exterior, Emily had battled internal storms throughout her career. She'd witnessed colleagues underestimate her repeatedly, attributing her technical genius to luck or circumstance. Male counterparts often assumed they knew more, leaving her advice unheeded, sometimes with disastrous consequences that only reinforced her drive to master everything. She had learned to wait, to observe, and to act only when she could guarantee perfection. Every failed expectation against her became fuel, every skeptical glance a reminder that she had to prepare twice as thoroughly to succeed once. As Emily walked through the hangar now, memories of those battles flitted through her mind. The laughter, the doubts, the moments of quiet triumph, all converged into a single sensation: readiness. She didn't rush. She moved with purpose. The Apache she had just flown was more than a machine. It was the culmination of every lesson she had ever learned about mechanics, patience, and human judgment. The general may have expected a failed attempt, but Emily knew that failure wasn't part of her vocabulary. Not now. Not ever. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her father, who had passed away 2 years earlier. She often imagined his voice guiding her through complex diagnostics, whispering encouragement during moments of doubt. "Emily," she heard him say in her mind, "the machine doesn't care about who you are. It only responds to what you know and what you do. Respect it, and it will serve you well." Today, the Apache had responded, not just to her hands, but to her understanding, the full culmination of years of invisible, patient work. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the tarmac, the hangar seemed to shrink around her. Soldiers moved cautiously, checking equipment, but their eyes lingered on her. She didn't seek attention. She had never wanted it, but it had found her. And she was ready for it, in the way only someone who had spent a lifetime preparing could be. Her hands, now slightly greasy from adjustments made during preflight, reflected both her humility and her mastery. She was calm, composed, and fully aware that the true test was yet to come. The general remained in the hangar, cigar forgotten, silently observing. For the first time in decades, he was witnessing someone redefine his understanding of capability. He had known the rules, the hierarchy, the chain of command, and here was Emily, quietly defying them with nothing but knowledge, skill, and courage. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't boast, she didn't demand respect. She earned it in the most silent and undeniable way, by doing what others believed impossible. By the time Emily left Hangar 3 that evening, the base had changed. Whispers replaced laughter. Soldiers who had doubted her walked a little taller, reconsidering their assumptions about who could fly and who could not. Emily herself remained unaware of the waves she had set in motion. Her eyes, instead, were fixed on the horizon, imagining what could come next. The Apache had been her first flight, but it would not be her last. The past had shaped her. The present had tested her. And the future, she felt instinctively, was ready to recognize her. And so, as the desert sky turned shades of gold and crimson, Emily Carter walked away, a technician, a dreamer, a master in disguise, unaware that a simple joke had transformed into the first chapter of a story that would leave an entire base, and eventually the military itself, in awe. The sun had begun its slow descent over the Arizona desert, casting a golden glow across the sprawling Army aviation base. Hangar 3 smelled of oil, fuel, and anticipation. Outside, the row of Apaches gleamed under the sunlight, their blades casting long shadows on the tarmac. Inside, the soldiers whispered nervously, unsure if what they had witnessed yesterday was real or a fluke. But today, the stage was set for Emily Carter's first real test in the Apache cockpit, a test that would ripple through the base and challenge the very assumptions of those who doubted her. Emily approached the helicopter with a measured calm, her posture straight and purposeful. She had spent years observing, diagnosing, and maintaining these machines, but today she would pilot one, for real, with her own hands on the controls. The general stood off to the side, arms crossed, his face unreadable. He was both curious and skeptical, still holding on to the faint hope that Emily's expertise as a technician would not translate to flight ability. "Ready, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Harris, the instructor assigned to supervise her. He had been warned not to underestimate her, but old habits die hard. His tone was polite, but it carried a layer of doubt. Emily nodded. "Yes, sir. I've run pre-flight checks. Systems are within operational parameters." Her voice was steady, betraying none of the nervous energy that surged beneath the surface. Inside, her heart beat fast, not with fear, but with anticipation. Every moment she had spent studying, every late night at the hangar, every lecture she had absorbed about hydraulics, avionics, and flight mechanics had led to this exact point. As she climbed into the cockpit, the weight of the moment pressed against her shoulders. She adjusted her seat, tightened her harness, and ran her hands over the controls, each movement deliberate. The Apache felt alive beneath her touch. The rotors, engines, and control surfaces were familiar friends. To Emily, flying was not just operating a machine. It was communication, a dialogue between human and metal. And she had spent years learning its language. The instructor glanced at the instrument panels, noting her precise movements. "I've never seen a technician handle the controls like this," he muttered under his breath, barely audible. Emily's hands moved over the switches and levers with confidence, running through the checklist as if reciting a well-worn poem. Hydraulic systems checked. Fuel pressure stable. Avionics online. Sensors calibrated. All systems nominal. Then the moment arrived. Emily eased the collective lever forward, feeling the engines respond immediately. The Apache's massive blades began to spin, cutting the warm air in the hangar with a growing roar. Dust and small debris scattered across the tarmac as the force of the rotors kicked up around the machine. Soldiers instinctively took a step back, realizing the helicopter was no longer stationary. The general's cigar wobbled in his fingers as he watched, mouth slightly open. This was the moment he had half expected to mock, half expected to fail. And yet, here was Emily, commanding the Apache like a seasoned pilot. The helicopter lifted slowly at first, its landing gear inching off the ground. Emily's eyes scanned the instruments, then the horizon outside. She adjusted the cyclic slightly, countering the subtle tilt of the machine. The Apache hovered, steady as a hummingbird, responding to her control inputs with near-perfect precision. Every movement was calculated, smooth, and deliberate. The soldiers in the hangar stared in disbelief. Whispers spread like wildfire. "She's keeping it steady," one murmured, unable to hide awe from his voice. Emily's mind, though intensely focused, remained calm. She adjusted the collective to gain a few more feet of altitude, feeling the machine respond to her commands. The rotors whirred in harmony with her intentions, almost as if the Apache itself recognized her skill. This was no fluke. This was mastery. Her years of understanding the helicopter's mechanics allowed her to anticipate the subtle shifts in balance, the delays in hydraulic response, the nuances of rotor inertia. She was piloting not through guesswork, but through intimate knowledge of every component. The general remained silent, watching the scene unfold. His smirk had vanished, replaced by a tension he could not disguise. The last time he had been this taken aback was when he had witnessed an elite pilot execute a complex emergency maneuver, and he had expected Emily to struggle just to get off the ground. Yet here she was, hovering in place as though she had been trained for this moment her entire life. A few feet above the tarmac, Emily executed a gentle lateral movement, shifting the Apache sideways to avoid a mock obstacle set by the instructors. The helicopter responded perfectly, blades slicing through the air without wobble or overcorrection. Every adjustment she made was precise, deliberate, and confident. The hangar below was silent, soldiers holding their breaths. "Steady," Emily whispered under her breath, though the words were for herself. She had done countless simulations, studied failures, and mastered every system, but nothing compared to the raw reality of flight. Her senses were on fire, the roar of the engines, the vibration through the seat, the desert wind against the cockpit canopy. And yet, she remained entirely composed. Minutes passed, each feeling like hours to the onlookers. Then, as smoothly as she had lifted, Emily began to lower the Apache, carefully bringing it back toward the tarmac. The descent was flawless, controlled, and precise, a soft, perfect landing. Dust settled, rotors slowed, and the engines powered down, leaving only the echo of awe in the hangar. For a moment, no one spoke. The general remained rooted in place, cigar forgotten, jaw slightly slack. He had expected a joke, a failure, or at least some stumble. But Emily had achieved a liftoff and landing that few trained pilots could execute with such poise. He finally muttered, almost to himself, "That wasn't luck." The soldiers around the hangar erupted into whispers of amazement. Some clapped quietly, others exchanged stunned glances. Lieutenant Harris shook his head, muttering, "I've never seen anything like it." Emily removed her gloves, stepped out of the cockpit, and handed them back to the mechanic without a hint of pride in her voice. Her focus had already shifted to the next step, the next challenge. The general finally broke the silence. "Dismissed, Captain," he said, his tone neutral, but carrying the weight of recognition. Though his words were brief, the message was clear. Emily Carter had exceeded every expectation, shattered assumptions, and most importantly, demonstrated something no one could have predicted. As Emily walked away from the Apache, the wind caught her hair, tugging at it gently. Soldiers followed her with their eyes, seeing not just a technician, but a figure who had redefined possibility. Her calm demeanor belied the storm of thoughts inside her. The first lift was more than a personal victory. It was a statement, a quiet defiance of every doubt cast her way. In that moment, Emily realized something fundamental. Flying the Apache wasn't just about skill. It was about preparation, knowledge, instinct, and trust. Trust between human and machine. The helicopter had responded not to license or rank, but to understanding. And she had it in spades. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow across the desert and the airbase, Emily paused, looking at the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, the wind carried the faint echoes of her father's voice. "Respect the machine. Emily, it will serve you well if you do." The general watched from the tarmac, arms crossed, silent and thoughtful. For decades, he had seen the best of pilots come and go. He had trained them, pushed them, and tested them under fire. But none had commanded a machine like this. Not with license, not with rank, not with the swagger of an elite graduate. Emily Carter had just changed everything. And in that quiet, golden light of the Arizona evening, it became clear to everyone watching, this was only the beginning. The hangar was quiet the next morning, but tension hung in the air like a thick desert haze. Emily Carter had completed her first real lift the day before, yet the whispers and sideways glances from soldiers made her feel both seen and scrutinized. She didn't seek attention. She had never wanted it. But achievement, especially when it defied expectations, had a way of calling it out. Today, the general wanted to see if yesterday's demonstration was luck or a testament to genuine skill. Lieutenant Harris, the supervising instructor, approached Emily as she adjusted the headsets and checked her instruments. "The general's requested a full flight simulation," he said, his voice cautious. "He wants to see your abilities in a controlled scenario." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Controlled, sir?" she asked. Harris hesitated. "Well, yes, controlled. But simulations can be unpredictable. They're designed to test pilots' instincts under pressure. Emily's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. "I understand, sir. I'm ready." She had prepared for countless simulations in her career, but never as the pilot. Her mind cataloged the Apache systems with almost obsessive precision. She knew how it responded under normal conditions, and she had memorized how each component reacted to stress. Today, she would find out if that knowledge could translate into action. Inside the simulator, the Apache was replicated with meticulous care. Every switch, lever, and display mirrored the real machine. Emily settled into the seat, sliding her hands over the controls as she had countless times before. Only now, her actions carried the weight of true responsibility. Harris ran through the scenario, setting the parameters for a routine flight over simulated desert terrain. The airfield, the enemy simulation drones, and a series of scheduled obstacles were all programmed to create a challenging but standard test. Everything began smoothly. Emily guided the simulated Apache through pre-flight checks, liftoff, and the initial maneuvers. She felt the machine as if it were alive, responding to her commands with fluid precision. Harris, watching from the side, couldn't hide his growing surprise. "She's precise," he muttered. Too precise for a first-time pilot. But just as they reached the midpoint of the simulation, the unexpected occurred. The simulator system triggered a hydraulic failure, mid-flight, at a critical altitude over rough terrain. Warning lights flashed, alarms blared, and the motion platform rocked violently. The scenario had been programmed to test emergency protocols, but no one had anticipated Emily being the pilot. Harris's fingers hovered over the override controls, ready to intervene, but he hesitated. This was her moment. Emily froze for less than a second, taking in the cascade of alarms and system warnings. Her mind raced, cataloging the possible failure points and responses. Years of maintenance experience kicked in. She recognized the pattern of failure immediately. The primary hydraulic system was compromised, and the secondary backup was sluggish. Most pilots would have panicked, pulling at controls and relying on instinct alone. Emily relied on knowledge. She rerouted the system manually, isolating the faulty component and compensating with auxiliary hydraulics. The Apache's simulated rotors stabilized. The cockpit lights blinked, then steadied. Emily adjusted the collective and cyclic in subtle, deliberate motions. The helicopter regained balance and leveled in mid-air. Harris exhaled audibly, watching the display screens and indicators. The situation was stabilizing, but only because of Emily's unique combination of technical mastery and calm under pressure. The general had been observing from the back of the simulation room. His arms were crossed, expression unreadable. He had anticipated mistakes, hesitation, maybe even failure. Yet Emily moved through the crisis like a conductor guiding a symphony. Each decision was precise, calculated, and executed with confidence. It wasn't just piloting. It was problem-solving in real time under life-or-death conditions. Minutes passed. The simulated emergency persisted. Sensor failures, warning lights, and simulated wind gusts combined to create a harrowing test. Yet Emily maintained control. Her hands moved with the fluidity of someone who understood the Apache as an extension of herself. Every system, every mechanical nuance responding instantly. Harris and the other instructors watched, jaws tight, aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Finally, Emily guided the simulated Apache back to the virtual airfield, executing a perfect emergency landing. The rotors slowed, alarms silenced, and the simulator platform settled. Silence filled the room for a heartbeat. Then the room erupted into astonished murmurs. Harris shook his head, barely able to speak. She saved the simulation. She actually saved it. The general's expression softened, a faint hint of admiration breaking through his usual stern demeanor. He approached Emily, who had removed her headset and gloves, her face calm, but flushed with focus. "Captain Carter," he said, voice low but measured. "That was impressive." He paused, searching for the right words. "Most pilots would have lost control, yet you handled it like it was routine." Emily met his gaze evenly. "Sir, the system failure was predictable if you understand the mechanics. I didn't react, I resolved." The general chuckled quietly, a sound that surprised those nearby. "Resolve, huh? That's one way to put it. Most people call that instinct." He shook his head, his eyes betraying the faintest trace of shock. Emily's performance had not only validated her skills, but challenged everything he believed about the line between technician and pilot. Word of the simulation spread quickly through the base. Soldiers who had doubted her competence now whispered with reverence. Emily, as usual, remained quiet. She did not seek fame or acknowledgement. To her, the success was not a triumph to be celebrated, but confirmation that preparation, discipline, and understanding could overcome doubt, and sometimes even life or death situations. Yet the general remained pensive. He had expected a spectacle, perhaps a minor failure, and certainly a moment of embarrassment. Instead, he had witnessed a young woman transform a hypothetical disaster into a flawless recovery. The implications were staggering. If she could do this in simulation, what could she do in real flight situations? For Emily, the simulation was more than a test of skill. It was a bridge between her years of preparation and the opportunities she had been denied. She had trained as a technician, studied the machines obsessively, and endured skepticism and bias. Yet now, in the face of deliberate challenges, she had proven that expertise could surpass experience alone. Every adjustment she had made during the crisis had been calculated, every decision informed by deep understanding, and every action had confirmed her ability to rise above expectations. When the simulation ended, and the observers finally exhaled, Emily stepped out of the cockpit. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her face remained composed. Soldiers and instructors alike looked at her differently now. Whispers of astonishment filled the hangar. The general, unusually quiet, simply nodded. No words were necessary. Respect had been earned, quietly but irrevocably. Harris approached her with a mixture of relief and admiration. "Captain, that was incredible. Most trained pilots would have crashed." Emily smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I know how the system works. That's the difference." The general watched her from across the hangar, the weight of realization settling over him. She was not just a technician. She was something rare, something exceptional. And he, like everyone else, had underestimated her. As Emily left the simulator, her mind was already turning to the next challenge. She knew that real flight would be different, more dangerous, more unpredictable. But for the first time, she felt the unmistakable thrill of potential realized. She had bridged the gap between preparation and action, knowledge and execution. And though she didn't yet know it, this would be only the first of many moments where she would astonish the people who doubted her, starting with the general himself. The sun outside was dipping below the horizon, casting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Emily stepped out into the warm evening air, her mind calm, her purpose clear. She had faced a test no one expected her to survive, and she had succeeded. The Apache, once a machine of mystery and distance, now seemed to recognize her mastery. And as the base settled into quiet murmurs of awe and speculation, Emily Carter walked into the shadows of Hangar 3, ready for whatever came next. Because the next test would not be a simulation. It would be real. The early morning sky over the Arizona desert was painted in hues of pink and gold, the air crisp and dry. The base was stirring to life, soldiers moving briskly between hangars, checking helicopters, and preparing for the day's scheduled exercises. Emily Carter walked past the lineup of Apaches with quiet purpose, her boots crunching against the gravel. Her mind was focused, disciplined, but a faint unease tugged at her. She had handled simulations flawlessly, lifted off without error, and proven her skill to every skeptical eye on base. Yet she sensed that her true test had yet to come. It arrived suddenly. A distress call echoed over the base communications. One of the rookie pilots, Lieutenant Daniels, was in trouble. His Apache had suffered a sudden mechanical failure during a low-altitude training flight. The helicopter was unstable, its instruments flashing red with warnings. The wind gusts in the desert canyon amplified the danger. Harris, the instructor, grabbed a radio and shouted orders, but it became immediately clear. No trained pilot was close enough to guide Daniels directly to safety. "Carter," the general's voice came over the comm, sharp and commanding. "You're closest. Take the second bird. Fly out and get him down." Emily's pulse quickened. This was no simulation, no controlled test. This was real. Lives were at stake. Without hesitation, she sprinted to her assigned Apache, climbing into the cockpit with practiced speed. The engines roared to life beneath her hands, blades cutting the early morning air. Soldiers paused in awe. This was the moment they had only whispered about, the moment that would define her. "Stay calm," she muttered to herself. Her fingers ran over the controls, verifying hydraulics, fuel systems, and rotor alignment. Every second mattered, but her movements were deliberate. Her mind cataloged the position of Daniel's helicopter, the canyon terrain, the wind patterns, and the altitude. This wasn't just piloting. This was life-or-death problem-solving under pressure. The base watched in silence as Emily lifted off, the roar of the Apache echoing across the desert. She angled her craft toward the canyon, scanning the horizon with sharp focus. There was Daniels, struggling to maintain control, the helicopter tilting dangerously with every gust of wind. A panicked voice crackled over the radio. I can't stabilize it." Emily's voice was calm, steady, and commanding. "Lieutenant Daniels, listen carefully. Follow my lead. I need you to mirror my movements precisely. Trust me, I've got you." Time seemed to slow. She matched Daniel's altitude, aligning her Apache with his in a tight formation. Her hands moved like a metronome, every adjustment smooth, precise, and calculated. She guided him through a series of maneuvers designed to stabilize his craft, countering the mechanical failure with tactical finesse. It was a dance between two massive helicopters, one controlled by fear, the other by mastery. The wind howled through the canyon, buffeting both aircraft, but Emily maintained perfect control. She adjusted Daniel's approach angle through the radio, instructing him step by step. Slowly, the rookie pilot regained composure, following her guidance with trembling hands. Emily's calm tone became an anchor in the chaos. "Steady, steady. You're doing fine. Follow me." Minutes felt like hours. Emily navigated the canyon's twists and turns, ensuring that Daniels avoided obstacles while keeping both helicopters stable. The soldiers watching from the base could hardly breathe, gripping railings and equipment as if their tension could somehow tether the aircraft in place. The general's jaw was set, his face unreadable, but his eyes followed every movement with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Finally, the canyon opened to flat desert terrain near the base. Emily instructed Daniels on the descent, guiding him to reduce throttle, align the skids, and approach slowly. Every movement had to be precise. Too fast, and the landing could be catastrophic. Too slow, and the helicopter could stall. Emily's calm, steady hands choreographed the final moments. "Skids down. Steady, steady," she instructed, her voice the only constant in the roaring wind. Daniels touched down safely, shaking but alive. Emily landed her Apache beside him moments later, shutting down the engines with perfect control. Silence filled the airfield. Then, slowly, soldiers began to clap, voices trembling with relief and admiration. The general walked up, his usual stern expression softened. For once, he didn't speak immediately, simply observing the two helicopters on the tarmac. Finally, he exhaled, shaking his head. "Carter," he said, voice low but carrying weight, "that was extraordinary. You didn't just fly, you saved a life." Emily removed her helmet, brushing back a strand of hair, her face calm despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "Sir, the systems were failing, but the path to safety was clear. He just needed guidance." The general studied her, realizing in that moment that his assumptions about her capabilities had been shattered. She wasn't just a skilled technician or an exceptional simulator pilot. She was someone capable of life-saving decisions under extreme pressure. Daniels climbed down from his helicopter, visibly shaken. "Thank you, Captain," he said, voice trembling. I don't know what I would have done without you." Emily smiled faintly. "You did what you could. Now we know the limits and how to manage them next time." Word of her heroics spread like wildfire across the base. Soldiers who had once doubted her competence now whispered her name with reverence. Emily, as always, remained quiet, focused, and composed. She didn't seek accolades. She sought mastery and the quiet satisfaction of a mission accomplished. The general, however, had changed. He had witnessed something few had the privilege to see. A woman whose combination of technical knowledge, instinct, and calm under pressure surpassed many seasoned pilots. He now viewed Emily Carter not just as an anomaly, but as a force to be reckoned with. That evening, the base gathered for debriefings, simulations, and repairs. Emily remained in the hangar, checking her Apache and running diagnostics to ensure no damage had occurred during the emergency. Every lever, every wire, every sensor had to be perfect. For her, success wasn't about the applause or the recognition. It was about knowing she had controlled the machine flawlessly, and that another life had been saved because of it. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the desert sky in shades of crimson and gold, Emily Carter stood by her Apache, reflecting on the day. She had faced fear, chaos, and mechanical failure, and had emerged victorious. Not because of luck or circumstance, but because she had prepared relentlessly, studied endlessly, and trusted herself and her knowledge. The general approached quietly, standing beside her. "You've changed the way I think about pilots, Carter," he said. His voice was low, carrying both pride and a hint of disbelief. "You've taken what most people see as limitation and turned it into mastery." Emily nodded, her eyes on the Apache. "Sir, machines respond to knowledge and respect. Panic doesn't fix them. Understanding does." The general didn't argue. He simply nodded, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. For once, words weren't necessary. Emily Carter had earned not just respect, but something far more powerful: trust, awe, and the knowledge that her career was no longer constrained by assumptions or bias. That night, the base was quiet, but stories of Emily's heroics spread quickly. Pilots, instructors, and mechanics alike told anyone who would listen about the technician who had flown in awe, Apache like a seasoned pilot, and saved a rookie's life in the process. Emily herself slept lightly, already thinking ahead. She knew the real challenges weren't over. If anything, they had just begun. Because from now on, Emily Carter wasn't just a mechanic, a technician, or a trainee. She was a pilot, one whose skill, calm, and mastery could defy expectations, challenge norms, and when the moment demanded, save lives. And the world, starting with the general himself, was watching. The base was alive with a buzz the next morning. Word of Emily Carter's heroics had spread like wildfire overnight, and soldiers, instructors, and officers crowded the hangar and offices to hear first-hand accounts of her emergency flight. Some spoke in awe, recounting how she had guided Lieutenant Daniels safely to the tarmac. Others whispered in disbelief, struggling to reconcile the fact that a technician, not a certified pilot, had not only flown the Apache, but had performed a flawless rescue under extreme conditions. The general's office became the center of debate. High-ranking officers gathered, some skeptical, others intrigued. Many were reluctant to officially recognize Emily's achievements, citing protocol and standard procedure. "She's a technician, General," one officer argued, his tone defensive. "She wasn't cleared for solo flight. Procedures exist for a reason." The General, Robert Unn, leaned back in his chair, observing the room with calm authority. His eyes, though lined with age and experience, carried a spark of conviction. "I am fully aware of the regulations," he said evenly. "But what we witnessed yesterday and today is not a matter of rules. It is a matter of skill, judgment, and life-saving ability." Captain Carter acted decisively, successfully, and without error. If regulations would have delayed her, Daniels might not have made it. A murmur rippled through the room. One of the younger officers, a lieutenant colonel known for strict adherence to protocol, challenged him. "Sir, with all due respect, this sets a dangerous precedent. Allowing a technician to operate an Apache unsanctioned. What if something went wrong next time?" The general's voice hardened, but remained controlled. "And what if something went wrong because we delayed action to follow procedure? We are here to save lives and execute missions. Captain Carter has proven she is capable of both. We recognize talent where it exists, not where it is expected to be." Emily, standing quietly at the back of the office, listened to the debate without interrupting. She had learned early in her career that skill alone was not always enough to break barriers. Now, she understood that acknowledgement would require more than demonstration. It would require advocacy from someone with authority. The general's words were the first defense she had ever heard in a setting like this. "General N," another officer interjected, trying to steer the discussion toward compromise. Perhaps she could be assigned under supervision for certified flight hours. That would satisfy regulations without undermining protocol. The general considered this briefly, then shook his head. "No, Captain Carter has already exceeded what any pilot has done during training. Additional supervised hours are not needed to validate what we have already seen. What she needs is the opportunity to prove herself officially without unnecessary bureaucracy holding her back." A silence settled over the room. The weight of his authority, combined with undeniable evidence of Emily's capability, had shifted the conversation. Officers who had doubted her began to nod subtly, conceding the point. Emily remained composed, though inside, a quiet sense of vindication grew. She had trained, studied, and prepared for years. Now, the recognition she had earned was finally being acknowledged. Outside the office, soldiers gathered around her Apache, whispering excitedly. Some approached cautiously, unsure how to address someone who had broken the mold so decisively. "Captain," one young pilot began, voice hesitant, I can't believe you pulled that off yesterday. That was incredible." Emily smiled faintly, brushing a hand over the helicopter's fuselage. "It wasn't just me," she said quietly. "Understanding the systems, preparing thoroughly, and knowing what to expect, that's what matters. The helicopter responds to knowledge." A few older pilots, men who had served decades in the field, nodded silently. They had seen their share of exceptional individuals, but Emily Carter's combination of technical mastery and calm under pressure was unlike anything they had witnessed. She had transcended the traditional boundaries of rank and certification, demonstrating a rare aptitude for both machines and leadership. The general emerged from his office, walking toward Emily with a purposeful stride. His eyes met hers, a mix of pride and determination evident in his gaze. "Captain," he said, voice steady, "the bureaucracy will take time, but I want you to know that you have my full support. I will fight for your right to fly, officially and without restriction. You've earned it, not because of rank, not because of protocol, but because of your skill, judgment, and courage." Emily nodded, a calm smile on her face. "Thank you, sir. I'm ready for whatever comes next." The general paused, looking around at the officers still murmuring in the office. "Let this be clear," he said firmly. "The Army recognizes ability where it exists. Captain Carter has proven herself beyond doubt. Anyone who questions her capability will answer to me personally." The room quieted instantly. Respect, long overdue, had been commanded. Emily's actions had forced a reevaluation of assumptions, challenging a system that often valued tradition over talent. The general's defense was more than just words. It was a declaration that skill, courage, and mastery could not be confined by arbitrary rules. That afternoon, Emily returned to her Apache, running standard diagnostics and preflight checks. She moved with deliberate care, hands over the controls, eyes scanning every indicator. Soldiers observed quietly, inspired not just by her technical skill, but by her composure and confidence. She didn't boast or demand attention. Her quiet mastery spoke louder than any accolades could. Harris approached, a note of awe in his voice. "Captain, I don't know how you do it. You're calm, precise, and you think faster than anyone I've seen." Emily's gaze remained on the instruments. Training, observation, and preparation. Panic never helps. Understanding does. By evening, the base had shifted. Soldiers whispered about her heroics. Pilots spoke of her calm precision. And even the most skeptical officers had begun to reconsider what was possible. Emily had become more than a technician or a rising pilot. She had become a symbol of excellence, determination, and the quiet defiance of expectations. The general watched from the edge of the hangar, observing Emily as she checked her Apache. He had expected skill, yes, but he had not expected the level of mastery, courage, and composure she had demonstrated. In his decades of service, he had seen many pilots rise and fall under pressure. Few had impressed him like Emily Carter. She had not only flown, but she had also inspired, challenged assumptions, and forced a reevaluation of what it meant to serve with excellence. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the desert tarmac, Emily finished her checks and stepped back. The base was quiet now, the day's chaos giving way to reflection and admiration. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. There would always be skeptics, always rules, and always obstacles. But she also knew that she had proven her worth, and that her skill, judgment, and composure could not be ignored. The general approached one final time, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Captain Carter," he said, voice low but firm, "today you've shown what true mastery looks like. Never forget it, and never let anyone tell you otherwise." Emily met his gaze evenly, her expression calm and resolute. "I won't, sir." And with that, she turned back to her Apache, ready to prepare for the next mission, the next challenge, and the next opportunity to prove that she was not just a technician, not just a trainee, but a pilot of exceptional skill and courage. The desert sky glowed crimson as the sun dipped below the horizon. Emily Carter's journey was far from over, but she had crossed a critical threshold. She had transformed doubt into respect, skepticism into admiration, and preparation into undeniable mastery. And as night fell, the base knew that they had witnessed the rise of someone extraordinary, someone whose story would inspire countless others to challenge expectations, break boundaries, and trust in their own abilities. The desert sun blazed overhead, relentless and unforgiving, as Emily Carter prepared for the most demanding challenge of her career yet, her first official combat training flight. The base had arranged a high-intensity exercise designed to simulate battlefield conditions, low-altitude maneuvers through rugged terrain, sudden enemy engagement, and complex coordination with multiple aircraft. This was no ordinary test. For many pilots, it was a grueling rite of passage, meant to push even the most seasoned veterans to their limits. Emily stood beside her Apache, gloves in hand, her gaze calm yet focused. The hum of other helicopters warming up filled the air, creating a chorus of anticipation. Soldiers moved with purpose, checking gear, running pre-flight checks, and reviewing flight plans. Emily's presence drew attention, but she paid little mind to the whispers. The first lift was a test of nerves and knowledge. This one would test mastery, instinct, and decision-making under pressure. Lieutenant Harris, assigned to observe but not intervene, approached her. "Captain, the terrain will be challenging. High winds in the canyon simulated enemy fire and multiple aircraft in formation. Are you ready?" Emily nodded, securing her helmet. "I'm ready. Let's do this." Her mind replayed years of study, every manual, every mechanical nuance, and every flight simulation she had absorbed. Unlike others, Emily didn't rely on instinct alone. She relied on knowledge, preparation, and understanding, and that gave her a confidence few could match. The helicopters lifted off together, engines roaring like a chorus of thunder across the desert. Emily's Apache moved smoothly into formation, blades slicing through the wind. The terrain below was rugged, with canyons, mesas, and sudden drops, a perfect testing ground for agility, precision, and coordination. Suddenly, the first simulated threat appeared: enemy drones. Small, fast-moving targets programmed to attack and destabilize aircraft. Alarms blared as Emily executed evasive maneuvers, her hands adjusting cyclic and collective with near-perfect precision. Her eyes scanned the horizon, anticipating the drone's trajectories, guiding the Apache with a combination of tactical skill and instinct honed through years of study. Other pilots struggled to maintain formation under the simulated attack, but Emily remained calm. She moved fluidly, countering the drone's advances while keeping her altitude steady and maintaining position relative to her fellow aircraft. Each movement was deliberate, each adjustment precise. The Apache responded seamlessly, as if it recognized the mastery behind the controls. "Captain Carter, you're stabilizing better than any of our experienced pilots," Harris said over the comm, disbelief evident in his tone. Emily's voice remained calm. "Focus on the mission. Predict, adjust, and execute. That's all it takes." The exercise intensified. Smoke grenades simulated explosions, forcing pilots to navigate through dust and obscured visibility. Wind gusts surged unpredictably through the canyon, testing control and balance. Emily adjusted her cyclic continuously, feeling the helicopter's subtle shifts through the seat, responding before the instruments even registered the change. Other pilots faltered. Some panicked briefly, overcorrecting or losing formation. Emily's Apache moved like an extension of herself, precise, responsive, and unflappable. The general observed from a nearby ridge, binoculars in hand. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp. He had expected skill, yes, but what he was witnessing now exceeded even his most optimistic assumptions. Emily was navigating, evading, and coordinating with other aircraft in a scenario designed to push elite pilots to their limits, and she was excelling. Midway through the exercise, a critical scenario occurred. One of the lead helicopters in formation simulated engine failure while flying over a canyon ridge. Panic would have spread quickly, but Emily acted immediately. She signaled her formation, adjusting her speed and altitude to provide guidance and cover for the compromised aircraft. Her voice was calm but authoritative, instructing the pilots step by step on stabilizing the lead craft and avoiding obstacles. Maintain position, she instructed. Adjust collective by 2 degrees. Keep altitude steady. Follow my path. The pilots responded, their confidence bolstered by her calm leadership. Emily's precise commands transformed chaos into coordinated action. Even the instructor pilots, seasoned veterans, were impressed by her ability to manage multiple variables simultaneously without hesitation. As the simulation progressed, Emily encountered another challenge. A sudden mechanical anomaly in her own Apache, a minor hydraulic fluctuation that could have destabilized a less experienced pilot. She recognized the issue immediately, rerouted the system manually, and adjusted the flight controls to compensate. The Apache responded flawlessly, and the mission continued without interruption. Her actions demonstrated not just piloting skill, but intimate technical mastery, the rare combination of knowledge and execution that few could achieve. The final phase of the exercise involved landing in a confined desert area, simulating a forward operating base under fire. Dust and debris whipped through the air as Emily guided her Apache with surgical precision. The other pilots, inspired and reassured by her composure, executed their landings flawlessly as well. Emily touched down smoothly, rotor blades slowing in perfect synchronization with the terrain. Silence followed for a heartbeat, broken only by the wind and the settling dust. Then, slowly, applause and cheers erupted from the observation teams and fellow pilots. The general approached, his expression a mix of pride and disbelief. "Captain Carter," he said, voice firm, "you've just executed a mission that would challenge even the most seasoned combat pilots. And you did it flawlessly." Emily removed her helmet, sweat glistening on her brow. "Thank you, sir," she said softly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. The Apache responds to preparation, understanding, and calm execution. Panic has no place in flight. Harris approached, eyes wide with admiration. "Captain, that was incredible. Your control, your leadership, it's unlike anything I've ever seen." Emily nodded, already thinking about the next steps, the next challenge. She had faced simulations, real emergencies, and now combat exercises. Each experience reinforced her understanding. Mastery was not about instinct alone. It was about knowledge, preparation, and trust in oneself and one's machine. The general lingered, studying her quietly. "Emily," he said finally, "you've changed the game. Your skill and composure aren't just remarkable. They set a new standard for what a pilot can be. Others will follow, and many will doubt. But I will stand by you. You've earned your place." Emily met his gaze, calm but resolute. "Thank you, sir. I'll continue to earn it." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, soldiers and pilots gathered around the Apache. Emily stood beside it, not as a technician or trainee, but as a pilot, a master of machines, a leader under pressure, and an inspiration to those around her. The desert wind swept across the tarmac, carrying with it the whispers of awe, respect, and disbelief. Emily Carter had faced simulations, emergencies, and combat exercises, and she had excelled at each. Her journey, however, was far from complete. The night sky turned dark, dotted with stars. Emily looked up briefly, reflecting on how far she had come. From a curious child in Texas, fascinated by machines, to a technician underestimated by many, to a pilot whose skill and courage had redefined expectations. She had earned respect, admiration, and trust. But more importantly, she had proven to herself that preparation, knowledge, and composure could overcome fear, doubt, and even danger. The base settled for the night, But the story of Emily Carter continued to resonate. Her journey was no longer just about flying an Apache. It was about breaking barriers, challenging assumptions, and inspiring others to see beyond limitations. And though the next mission, the next challenge, and the next test awaited, one truth had been firmly established: Emily Carter was extraordinary. The morning sun painted the Arizona desert in soft gold as the base buzzed with activity. Emily Carter walked through the hangar, her boots steady against the concrete, her mind clear and focused. The days of whispered doubts and sideways glances were behind her now. Today, her accomplishments would be formally recognized, a historic moment not just for her, but for the entire base. The general had called a ceremony to honor Emily's extraordinary achievements: her flawless Apache lift, her calm handling of life-threatening emergencies, and her performance in high-intensity combat exercises. Officers, pilots, mechanics, and soldiers from across the base gathered in the central courtyard, forming neat rows as cameras recorded the event. Word had spread quickly. This was not just a celebration of skill, but of breaking barriers and redefining expectations. Emily's heart remained steady, her posture calm. She did not crave the spotlight, yet she understood the importance of the moment. Every step she had taken, every late night spent in the hangar, every obstacle she had overcome, it had all led to this. She glanced at the general, standing tall beside a podium, his face solemn but proud. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice carrying across the courtyard, "today we gather to recognize not just skill, but courage, mastery, and perseverance. Captain Emily Carter has accomplished feats few would believe possible. She has flown the Apache with precision, saved lives under emergency conditions, and excelled in exercises designed to challenge our most experienced pilots." A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. Soldiers nodded, officers exchanged glances, and pilots, who had once doubted her, now watched in awe. The general continued, recounting her heroics: the rescue of Lieutenant Daniels, her mastery in the simulator, and her exemplary performance in the combat training exercise. Each story drew gasps, applause, and quiet admiration. Emily stood silently, letting the words wash over her. She thought of the years she had spent learning, observing, and preparing, often underestimated and overlooked. Recognition was gratifying, but what mattered most was that her actions had demonstrated a fundamental truth. Mastery is earned through preparation, knowledge, and calm execution, not through rank or assumption. The general raised a hand, signaling for silence. Captain Carter's accomplishments are historic. Today, we officially recognize her as a certified Apache pilot. Her license is granted not as a formality, but as acknowledgement of her undeniable skill, judgment, and courage. Let this serve as an example. Talent and dedication know no boundaries, and excellence must always be recognized, regardless of expectation. Applause erupted. Soldiers clapped vigorously. Some whistled in admiration, and a few wiped tears from their eyes. Emily felt a quiet pride, not of ego, but of validation. Every obstacle, every doubter, every moment of uncertainty had led to this, a moment where skill and courage were acknowledged beyond question. As she stepped forward to receive her official pilot certificate, she caught sight of Lieutenant Daniels in the crowd. He smiled, giving a small nod of gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of the life she had saved. Emily returned the gesture with a calm smile, understanding that the impact of her actions extended beyond recognition. She had made a tangible difference. The ceremony continued with commendations and photographs, but Emily's mind wandered to the lessons of her journey. She remembered the general's initial skepticism, the debates among officers, and the whispered doubts from her peers. She had faced them all with preparation, composure, and determination. And now, she had transformed skepticism into respect, doubt into recognition. Later, in the hangar, Emily walked among her Apache fleet, running diagnostics and checks as she had always done. Soldiers and pilots approached her, seeking advice, guidance, and mentorship. She spoke quietly, offering insights drawn from her experience, blending technical knowledge with practical advice. Her presence inspired confidence, teaching others that mastery was not reserved for the expected elite, but could be achieved through dedication and understanding. Harris approached, a rare smile on his face. "Captain, you've changed everything here. Pilots, mechanics, officers, everyone sees the possibility now. You've redefined what it means to serve." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "I've learned that respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And knowledge, preparation, and calm execution are what make the difference." The general appeared beside them, surveying the hangar. "Emily," he said quietly, "your story will inspire generations. Not just here, but across the entire service. You've shown that skill and courage can defy expectation, and that preparation combined with composure saves lives." Emily met his gaze, understanding the weight of his words. She had started as a technician, underestimated by many. She had faced skepticism, emergency situations, and high-pressure exercises. And now, her mastery was undeniable, her courage recognized, and her journey serving as a beacon of inspiration. Days later, Emily participated in advanced exercises alongside other elite pilots. Her presence no longer questioned but respected. She flew with confidence, leading formations, training rookies, and demonstrating tactical maneuvers that combined technical skill and strategic thinking. Her calmness under pressure became a model for others, her actions a blueprint for excellence. At night, she often walked alone to the tarmac, gazing at the stars above the desert. The Apaches stood silent, their blades reflecting moonlight, waiting for the next mission. Emily reflected on the journey, from curious technician to respected pilot, from whispered doubt to celebrated hero. She understood that recognition was not the end. It was a responsibility. To lead, to teach, and to inspire. One evening, a young soldier approached her quietly. "Captain Carter," he said, voice hesitant, "I want to fly one day like you. How did you get here?" Emily smiled faintly, kneeling beside him to meet his eyes. "By learning, preparing, and believing that skill matters more than expectation. Respect the machine, understand it, and trust yourself. That's how you succeed." The young soldier nodded, eyes wide with admiration. Emily stood, looking out across the desert. The wind carried the echoes of engines, the scent of fuel, and the quiet promise of future challenges. She understood that her story was more than her own. It was a lesson, an inspiration, a demonstration that limits existed only where people allowed them to. The general watched from a distance, recognizing that Emily Carter had changed the culture of the base. She had proven that barriers could be broken, that courage combined with knowledge could save lives, and that mastery was something earned through dedication and action, not conferred by rank or expectation. Emily climbed into her Apache one final time that night, lifting off into the moonlit desert. The rotors cut through the cool air, carrying her higher, faster, steadier. She maneuvered with precision, executing the drills she had learned and mastered. Below, the base was quiet, soldiers watching with respect and awe. As she soared over the desert, Emily understood that her journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, dangers, and skeptics. But she also knew that she had proven herself beyond doubt. She had transformed her career, inspired others, and cemented a legacy that would be remembered. And as the stars reflected off the Apache's canopy, Emily Carter piloted her machine with calm mastery, her journey complete, for now. She had risen above expectation, broken barriers, and shown the world what courage, knowledge, and composure could achieve. In the end, it wasn't the applause or recognition that mattered. It was the quiet understanding that she had earned her place among the best, had saved lives, and had inspired those who would follow. Emily Carter, pilot, hero, and legend in her own right, had arrived.